Dear Netflix, we need to talk about your newest season of Arrested Development. Once beloved TV show with a huge cult following has now become a bit of a drag. Many years have come and gone since 2006, the end of its original air. The finale of season 3 left us on a high note that not even a soprano could reach, and still to this day is my favourite episode of all time. You have a huge finale where the stakes are at their highest, only for the majority of characters to be split apart and separated, going down their own paths and making for comparatively later seasons. This is what I like to call the Game of Thrones conundrum. I'm writing this video essay thing to express my dissatisfaction with the second half of season 5 and to heed a warning not to continue producing this show for the reasons I'm about to outline. Let me straighten one thing out before we get started. I didn't hate season 4 or 5. In fact, I thought season 5's first half was a relative improvement. The family reuniting had some great humour, I found Ron Howard's barbecue really funny, and even the giant parade that takes place in episode 8 was thoroughly amusing. Season 5 also has a narrative hook that isn't just Michael bringing the family back together again, Lucille 2's disappearance. This made it feel like there was an actual purpose to renewing the show for a 5th season, instead of just what the characters were doing instead of attending Lucille's trial. Some other examples of great stuff from the 5th season include:
thank you for your service. Love you.
Father, it's me, George Michael.
Does this mean we can start leaving towels on the floor?
What are you doing?
I'm gonna kill you, you bleeding
Oh,
I cherish it.
my son.
And of course, when Oscar breaks Buster out from the cell at the parade, filmed like a scene from a Charlie Chaplin film. On the flip side of that particular episode, it took us over half an hour to get there. Now, I know this doesn't sound like much, but we should bear in mind that the original episodes were all roughly 22 minutes in length. Not only did the finale of part 1 clock in at 36 minutes in length, but the finale of season 5 was a staggering 47 minutes long. The condensed and jam-packed episodes are long gone now, leaving some bitterly boring and dragged out sequences. I'm therefore wondering why they re-edited season 4 if they were going to make the same terrible mistake in season 5. When we open into episode 1, we spend the first 10 minutes essentially playing catch-up. The creators clearly feared their audience would have some amnesia, and so we are presented with a huge round of flashbacks from season 4. What I find most strange about all this is that they advertised the announcement of season 5 with this remix of season 4, so really everybody should be on the same page at this point, right? Well, apparently not, because the flashbacks of season 4 crop up again and again throughout season 5. I'm willing to forgive them for doing flashbacks in the first 3 series because it was broadcasted on TV and therefore unbingeable. Now that the show is on Netflix though, there's no reason to use them at all because most people are watching it at their own pace, normally within the span of about a week, I'd estimate. Later on in the season, they show a tremendous amount of flashbacks to previous episodes from season 5 too. In the final episode, we are treated to not only a catch-up of what literally happened at the end of the previous episode, but shortly afterwards we see all of Job's antics with the disposal of Tony Wonder's body again. I don't know why the creators continually assume that the audience are perpetually incapable of paying attention to anything that happens in this show, especially considering one can easily binge all of this in a relatively short space of time. Having said that, when you crank up the length of the episodes to such a degree, it's no surprise that people would probably lose interest after a while. Another issue that arises with the time gap is that certain characters lose what made them so interesting in the first place. Take George Michael punching his dad, for example. The difference in Michael Cera's age is so apparent after just a couple of cuts, leaving a jaunting impact on the viewer. It saddens me further to find that his character no longer works comedically as an adult. This definitely rang true in season 4, but it's even worse now. George Michael's plot worked so much better when he was an awkward teenager with a creepy crush on his cousin, made humorous by how oblivious his family was to all of it. Now, he just has fake block. The only funny thing about fake block is that Michael Cera and Jesse Eisenberg look alike, and Jesse obviously played Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network. This was used to its advantage in season 4 though, and the idea feels like it outstayed its welcome in this newest season. In fact, it's an idea that was stripped away from George Michael just so that George Sr. had a way to pay back the Chinese to build the wall. A character who was largely in prison early on, who now hangs around like a little lost lamb without any real purpose whatsoever. When he's hanging around with Job in the earlier episodes, I honestly felt that it was some of the blandest humor this season had to offer. It probably didn't help either that season 5 kicked off with this type of pairing of the characters. When they're all together in episode 3, I was having a grand old time, but only temporarily. It's shortly afterwards that they shunt the paired scenes back in to make sense of how they all got together, which wasn't even necessary. You have Michael with Buster, George Sr. with Job, Lucille with Tobias, and so on. I get the whole point of the show is bringing the family back together, but initially it felt like the show had once again fallen prey to the cast's scheduling conflicts that were so apparent in the 4th season. Take Lindsay, for example, who just disappears after the parade and doesn't show up again until the end of the finale. I genuinely wondered what they did with her, but bearing in mind that Lucille Ostero is already missing and is the grand narrative of season 5, Lindsay's reappearance was extremely underwhelming. It was like she hadn't changed one bit, and as a result I couldn't help but think, oh, Portia de Rossi just couldn't be asked to do the second half of season 5. The biggest stab in the back, however, for me in this regard is that they didn't even bother having Liza Minnelli in this series. Presumably her age and scheduling play into this, but for her body to come out of the wall and not showing anything other than the cast staring down at her felt quite insulting and anticlimactic to say the least. Remember in season 4 when she wasn't there either in certain shots? Well, now this year it's Warden Gentles that gets the obviously not in the scene award. I mean, look at this! Not a single member of the cast are here with him, and even the flashback has the video tracking hiding his face. Also, there's some really bizarre editing where I think they tried to pay homage to Making a Murderer, but it just looks terrible. If tracking got in the way of the Warden's face, this glare that's covering Michael's face just gives off the impression that he's not even there too. Like they just concocted it in post or something. I wish somebody could also explain to me why Seth Rogen and Kirsten Wiig were replaced as young George and Lucille Bluth as well. I understand that these flashbacks, yep, more of those bloody things, were ultimately a mock-up of events used for the court scenes. I think in hindsight, however, the original casting would have tied up their inclusion in season 4 quite nicely. The cherry on the cake of all this, however, is some terrible dubbing takes place in episode 11. I'd rather you guys go and judge it for yourselves, but several instances of dialogue sounding a bit off or badly synchronized include when Buster is riding on the motorbike, when he's later inside the bike shop, and when Job has a conversation with Buster later on. This doesn't seem to ring true for the entirety of season 5, but the poor quality of dubbing that took place in this particular episode made it stick out like a sore thumb. Something else that sticks out like a sore thumb this series is Ron Howard's narration. Some of it works, but most of it is either stating the outright obvious or placed over the top of the flashbacks, once again treating the audience like total idiots that can't keep up with the story. It gets to the point of absurdity when Ron says something to the tune of "maybe received a phone call," and then her phone rings. Why even bother putting that in there? As I said before, I like his inclusion as a cast member, and it's not like his narration is entirely terrible. When Stan Sitwell and Maybe have a confrontation in the care home, Ron had a really good quip, but when it can be otherwise written so badly and other times unnecessary, I think it's worth pointing it out as a problem. By the final 3 episodes, the trial is in full swing. The trial itself is considerably irritating due to the following things: the introduction of excellent Fox lawyer Dusty, who from the offset I had zero interest in, and would become even more uninteresting as the season progressed. They use the slow walk music when he gets rejected by his crew on the beach, and he doesn't even walk off slowly, defeating the whole point of putting that music in there. The show's continuous dependence on courtroom humor seems to have been exhausted. The mock trial, Maggie Liza, Judge Ping, even season 4 is centered around Lucille's trial. Who honestly thought that another trial would be any more exciting or funny than the last ones? And finally, the worst offender, the 5 guilty lawyers. They shine them all up good and proper as though there's some purpose to their existence, only for them to predictably proclaim Buster to be guilty. I just do not care about this stuff. The only redeeming factor really about the trials was Francis Conroy nailing it as the prosecutor. I'm biased though, because 6 Feet Under is my favourite TV show of all time. I think the saddest aspect of this latest series, however, is Job. He was probably the saving grace of season 4, given his hilarious wedding and his relationship to Tony Wonder. He is still funny at times, like his creepiness around the weather girl is just straight up hilarious. The problem really boils down to him being gay, or pretending to be gay, who knows at this point. Let me clarify though, it's not his homosexuality specifically that I have a problem with, it's what they do with it that makes me sad. When he goes to the closet makers, Ron Howard fully admits that this idea is total garbage in the narration, and yet they still go ahead with putting it in there anyway. These segments were so dry and unnecessary. There's also a problem with things that are and aren't explained. We don't see Job prepping for any of his big magician acts in any of the other seasons to my knowledge, and yet I don't think it would have made any difference had Job just shown up to the parade and done his magic trick with Tony anyway. The parade segment with the pair was really funny, and I honestly kept wondering how they would bring Tony back to life. To conclude, it definitely feels like a show that's been going on for 16 years at this point. I appreciate the ending for what it is, given that Michael tried to get his brother free when ultimately it was Buster who killed Lucille too. Michael leaving off with his son and the family saying he'll return harkens back to the endings of previous seasons. No doubt if they did do another season, there'd probably be another family member in trouble for some reason that would lead Michael to trying to sort it out instead of just living his life with his son. With all factors considered though, I don't see this as very likely to happen. The ending does feel somewhat predictable, making audiences think if the show was renewed that it'll just be more of the same again. Considering the abuse allegations against Jeffrey Tambor too, I'd doubt they'd give the go-ahead for the show without him. Considering the younger cast members who have now grown up without anything funny to offer, and the older members of the cast soon to retire, I think it would be wise to just end the show here before any more complaints get hurled at Netflix, like this one. Yours faithfully, Harry. Thanks for watching. I've got a Love, Death and Robots video in the works as well, so expect that to be coming out soon. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload. Consider supporting the channel on Patreon or give the Discord server a check out. Now I do want to know from you guys if I was too cruel or not, because I feel like I kind of was with Disenchantment, but you know, I'm just stating my feelings at this point. Let me know in the comments what you think, where we will continue this discussion.